when the sword fell, and Boleyn's head might have still trembled for a few seconds on the edge of a dark consciousness. The woman who had led King Henry VIII to defy the Pope and split his kingdom. Death's cold breath was on her now. How did this queen, who had left an unshakable mark on English history, come to kneel before the foreign blade of an executioner? Are you ready to hear the silent screams of the past? By liking this video and subscribing, we can explore the forgotten stories in the dark corners of history together. Sharing where you are listening from in the comments will bring us even closer on this journey across time. London, May 19th, 1536. A pale sun filtered through heavy gray clouds, casting a hazy light upon the stones of the Tower of London. That dark fortress that had watched over the city for centuries, a symbol of royal power on one hand, a graveyard of hopes on the other. In the courtyard, a scaffold had been quietly built overnight. But this was not the high platform used for public executions. It was low, silent, designed in the cold style of a French executioner. There was no axe, only a sword, sharp, cold, foreign. Today, something would happen that English history had never seen before. A queen, a woman who was once crowned and had mesmerized courts with her fame, was to be executed. Her name, Anne Boleyn. The woman who had become Henry VIII's obsession, who had broken an entire nation away from the Catholic Church to have her, and was not merely a royal infatuation. She was a storm, a spark, the woman who had ignited the fire of the English Reformation. But now, less than 3 years after her rise to power, she was being judged as a traitor. Inside the tower, in the shadow of its stone walls, and awoke to her final morning. She had been imprisoned for 17 days. Outside, London held its breath. She was 35 years old. The crown was gone. Her friends had vanished, and betrayal surrounded her. But she still stood tall, carrying that grace and power, the woman who once commanded the attention of the entire court. She dressed with meticulous care. Every detail was planned. A dark gray robe lined with fur, as if it carried a dark and heavy weight. Beneath, it was a dark red kirtle. The color was not just for style. It was a choice to conceal the blood that would soon be shed. This was not vanity, but a silent defiance. She made a cold-blooded joke while getting ready. "I hear the executioner is very good, and my neck is small." She touched her neck lightly. Even with her final hours approaching, she was still brave, proud, and unbowed. But how did everything come to this? How did the woman for whom Henry risked everything come to kneel before a sword? Anne's story did not begin on a throne. It began with ambition. She was born the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, an ambitious diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard of England's powerful Howard family. She was raised amidst the elegance and intrigues of Europe's most elite courts. She spent her early years in the Netherlands and then found herself in the court of Queen Claude of France. She absorbed the grace, art, language, culture, and reform ideals of the Renaissance. When she returned to England in 1522, she did not conform to traditional standards of beauty. Her warm olive complexion, dark eyes, and sharp features made her distinct. She was far from the pale, blonde-haired ideal of the Tudor court, but far more captivating. Anne's appeal was not just in her looks. She had a sharp intellect, a brilliant wit, and a magnetic self-confidence. She attracted attention wherever she went. Henry VIII noticed her, too. At the time, he was married to Catherine of Aragon. Their marriage had grown cold, and years of failed pregnancies and the lack of a male heir had left Henry desperate. When he saw Anne, he was captivated. He offered her to be his mistress, as her sister Mary had been. But Anne said no. The words she reportedly spoke were bold and defiant. "If you want my body, you must give me a crown." Such a statement would have horrified most men. But Henry was enchanted. His heart and mind were captivated by Anne's defiant courage. What followed was not a simple love story. It was a storm that shook England for 7 years. It carried fury, intrigue, and betrayal from the stone walls of the palace. Henry appealed to the Pope for a divorce from Catherine. When the request was denied, the king took a step that changed the course of history. He broke away from the Catholic Church, established the Church of England, and declared himself its supreme head. The religious and political fabric of the nation was changed forever. All this chaos, just to be able to marry, and they were secretly married in January 1533, and was already carrying a new life in her womb. For both of them, everything was at stake. A son would secure Henry's legacy and justify this great turmoil. But fate's dark hand brought a daughter in September, Elizabeth. A deep void was opened in Henry's heart. The disappointment was sharp and bitter. Still, and was crowned queen with a magnificent crown. While the court watched in silent admiration for that moment, it was immediately clear that being a queen did not bring peace, and was not content to merely stand by the king's side. She had become an active, powerful force in the shadows and intrigues of the court. She fueled the fire of church reform, worked for the translation of the Bible into the common language, and built a brave, reform-minded circle. She saw herself not just as Henry's wife, but as a chosen partner in a divine mission, a hand appointed to reshape England. But this power and self-confidence brought enemies with it. The old nobles looked down on her, and devout Catholics cursed her as the woman who had severed ties with Rome. Spies and rivals in the court watched her every move, surrounding her with dark gossip. Then came the heartbreak, and became pregnant again, but miscarried in 1534. The pressure to bear a male heir settled over her like a suffocating shadow. The king's passion, once so powerful that it led him to defy the Pope, was slowly fading. Silent whispers began to circulate in the court. The disappointment echoed. In early 1536, and was once again filled with hope. She was pregnant, but that January, Henry was seriously injured in a jousting tournament. The news created a dark storm in Anne's soul. Some say the shock and stress were responsible for the miscarriage that followed. Reports claim the child was a boy. This moment had broken something in Anne and in her marriage. Hope and trust had dissolved into the cold stones of the palace. Shortly after, the king began to distance himself from her. The woman he once saw as the solution to his dynastic problems was now a bitter reminder of his failures. Her enemies in the court began to turn. One of the most dangerous, a former ally, Thomas Cromwell, was silently waiting in the shadows. He had once worked with and during the break with Rome, but now saw her as a threat, and did not mince her words, was politically active, and opposed some of Cromwell's policies. As Henry's interest in and waned, Cromwell saw his opportunity and acted. In April 1536, whispers turned into accusations. With Henry's silent approval or complicity, Anne's private life began to be scrutinized. On May 2nd, Anne was arrested. The charges were horrifying: adultery with 5 men, incest with her own brother, and plotting to kill the king. The evidence was weak, contradictory, based on gossip and forced confessions, but it didn't matter. In the Tudor court, truth was flexible, bent for power. Appearance was everything, and by all appearances, Anne Boleyn had lost the king's love by failing to bear a son, and was imprisoned in the Tower of London, where she had once been crowned. The stone walls of the palace had now become her prison. Her trial took place on May 15th. Not even a shadow of justice fell upon it. She had no legal counsel. The jury was filled with nobles who hated her. She could not challenge her accusers. The entire process was designed to secure a single outcome: guilty. And yet, Anne stood tall. There was a dark courage in her eyes, a silent defiance on her lips. No matter how close death's cold breath came, her presence still made the palace stones tremble, and defended herself to her last breath with grace, serenity, and honor. She was so powerful that even her enemies had to admit to the extraordinary eloquence of her speech. An observer wrote, "She spoke so wisely and so nobly that she seemed more like an angel than a woman." But all this magnificence could not change a predetermined verdict. Initially, her sentence was to be burned at the stake, a horrible, painful death. However, Henry changed it as an act of mercy, and the form of death was changed to execution by beheading. The king summoned a French swordsman known for his speed and skill. Perhaps it was a small kindness, or a way to maintain the appearance of royal honor. On the morning of May 19th, 1536, and prepared for her death, The execution was said to be at 8 a.m. She prayed, received Holy Communion, and prepared with a cold-blooded resolve. But fate cruelly made her wait. Hours passed, and was alone in her cold, empty room, left with her thoughts. She whispered again and again, "God have mercy on me." She declared her innocence repeatedly, not to save herself, but to affirm her righteousness before God. To those around her, she said, "I am innocent of the accusations that have condemned me." Those final hours were filled with a strange and eerie peace. Witnesses would later say, and stood so calmly that the very silence in the room deepened. Her courage did not crack. Her spirit was not broken. And then the moment came. Outside the tower, drums began to beat, a slow, deep, resonant call in the air. The signal for execution. The crowd gathered around the scaffold. Their number was about 1,000, fewer than expected. There was a solemn atmosphere, more than a show, and wore a simple dress in shades of gray and blood red, serious, powerful colors. Her dark robe billowed in the wind. Her steps were firm, her posture proud. The fire that had once captivated a king was still within her. She walked to the scaffold, heads bowed as she passed. She stood before the block, facing the silent crowd. Every breath, every movement echoed into eternity, and spoke her last words. There was no anger, no bitterness. While she had every right to curse the world, she chose grace. Good Christian people, I have come here to die according to the law, and therefore I will say nothing against it. The purpose of my coming here is not to accuse anyone or to mention the charges that have condemned me, but I pray to God to preserve the king and let him reign for a long time. A more gentle and merciful prince has not been seen, and he has always been a good, kind, and sovereign Lord to me. And if anyone wishes to concern themselves with my case, I ask them to judge it in the best possible way. So I bid you farewell, and I sincerely ask you all to pray for me. God have mercy on me. I entrust my soul to God. Then she prayed silently again and again. I entrust my soul to Jesus Christ. Lord Jesus, receive my soul. Her maids helped her remove her hood and tie a cloth to cover her eyes. She knelt beside the block, upright, without laying her head down, just as she had been taught. The French swordsman, dressed entirely in black, moved silently behind her. He had hidden his sword in the straw, and would not be startled by the sight of it. He called his assistant, took the sword, and momentarily distracted Anne. Then with a single swift and clean stroke, it was all over. The crowd held its breath. It is said that a bird flew away at that moment. Some said it was an omen. Others said it was Anne's soul finally set free. Her body was placed in a simple coffin, an old arrow chest, and buried in the chapel royal of St. Peter ad Vincula within the tower walls. No grand tomb, no royal ceremony, just stone and silence. Henry did not attend her funeral. The next day, he wore white and became engaged to Jane Seymour, Anne's maid, within 24 hours. They married 11 days after Anne's death. But Anne Boleyn's story did not end there. History judged her mercilessly for centuries. She was branded a temptress, a home wrecker, a witch. But as the dark curtains of time have been drawn back, the truth has begun to emerge. She was not a villain, but a visionary. She was a woman ahead of her time, one who challenged the iron rules of her world, doing so not out of vanity, but for the sake of faith and determination. She shaped her own destiny with courage, and she paid the closest price to death for it. And in a cruel twist of fate, there was a turning point that transcended time. The daughter whom Henry had scorned and almost disinherited, Elizabeth, would grow up to become one of the most powerful monarchs in English history. She would take her place on the throne as a queen born from the shadows, and never live to see it. But her bloodline silently changed the world. So when we remember her, we must remember her not just as a queen beheaded on a scaffold, not just as a name in the shadow of scandal, but as the woman who pushed the boundaries of her time, who rose, who fell, and who left behind a legacy that outshines every sword. This was not a story of evil. This was the story of Anne Boleyn. And history, though belatedly, has finally begun to see the truth behind the dark curtains.